20 consultants had just told Margaret Whitfield to shut down the company her father built from a garage 40 years ago, and she was 3 seconds from signing the papers when a man in a wrinkled shirt raised his hand from the back of the room and said the words that would change everything. "You're all looking at the wrong number." The boardroom went silent. Margaret's pen hovered over the termination agreement, her hand trembling, not from doubt, but from exhaustion. For 8 months she'd fought to save Whitfield Manufacturing, the company that had put her through college, buried her father with dignity, and employed half of Grayson County. Revenue was down 32%. 2 major clients had left. The consulting firm she'd hired, the most expensive one in the state, had sent 20 of their sharpest minds to comb through every ledger, every contract, every machine on the factory floor. Their verdict was unanimous: liquidate now, save what equity remains, walk away with dignity instead of bankruptcy. The man who spoke wasn't one of the 20. His name was Thomas Reyes, a mid-level financial analyst who'd been quietly auditing the smaller subsidiary accounts in a back office for 3 weeks, the kind of grunt work nobody else wanted. He had dark circles under his eyes that told a story of his own, and a coffee-stained tie that had clearly been knotted in a hurry that morning. Margaret barely recognized him. She hadn't even known his name until the receptionist whispered it to her days earlier. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in stories about real people fighting for what matters, hit like on this video right now, drop a comment telling me you're here, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Real Dad Stories so you never miss what happens next. Thomas stood slowly, clutching a thin folder that looked laughably small compared to the 3-inch binders the consulting firm had presented. "Everyone here has been looking at Whitfield Manufacturing as one company," he said, his voice steady despite the roomful of expensive suits staring him down. "But it's not one company. It's 3. And you've been averaging the failure of 2 against the success of 1, which is why the whole picture looks broken." The room stirred. One of the senior consultants, a polished man named Gerald Ashcombe, scoffed audibly. "We've run the numbers 100 times, Mr. Reyes. The company is bleeding cash across every division." "Not every division," Thomas said, opening his folder. "The Precision Parts Division, the one making components for medical devices, has grown 11% this year. It's small, it's quiet, nobody's been paying attention to it because it doesn't make flashy headlines. But it's profitable, and it's the future of this company, if anyone bothered to separate it from the 2 divisions that actually are failing." Margaret set down her pen. She hadn't heard anyone mention the medical parts division in weeks. It had always been her father's pet project, something he'd started 2 years before he passed, convinced that precision manufacturing for hospitals was where American industry needed to go. Everyone else had dismissed it as too small to matter. Thomas continued, laying out spreadsheets that told a different story than the one the consultants had built. The furniture division and the industrial hardware division were indeed dying, crushed by overseas competition and outdated equipment. But the medical parts division, if isolated, restructured, and given proper investment instead of being starved to prop up the other 2, could carry the entire company forward. He'd traced the cash flow himself, staying late every night for 3 weeks, cross-referencing invoices the big firm's software had apparently flagged as irrelevant because they didn't fit the standard liquidation model. "You want to shut down the whole building," Thomas said, looking directly at Margaret now, not at the consultants, "because you're treating a healthy limb like it's infected just because it's attached to 2 that are dying. Amputate the right things, and this company doesn't just survive. It becomes something your father would recognize." The mention of her father cracked something in Margaret's chest. She looked around the room at the 20 consultants who suddenly seemed less like saviors and more like men in a hurry to close a file and move to their next client. She looked back at Thomas, at his tired eyes and his cheap tie, and asked him the only question that mattered. "Why does this matter so much to you? You're not even on the leadership team." Thomas hesitated, and for a moment the confidence that had carried him through his presentation wavered. "Because I've watched what happens to a family when the paycheck stops," he said quietly. "I'm raising my daughter alone. Her name is Ivy. She's 7. Her mother left 2 years ago, and it's just been us since. I know what it means for 300 people in this county to lose their jobs on the same Tuesday. I know what that does to a household, to a kid's lunch money, to a mortgage payment. I couldn't sit in that back office for 3 weeks crunching numbers without asking myself if there was another way. So I looked. And I found one. The boardroom that had been so certain, so clinically confident just minutes earlier, sat in an uncomfortable silence. Gerald Ashcombe cleared his throat and tried to argue that restructuring a division mid-crisis was operationally risky, that the timeline Thomas proposed was unrealistic, that hope was not a strategy. But Margaret was no longer listening to him. She was staring at the folder in Thomas's hands, at numbers that suddenly made her father's final years make sense, at a small division he'd quietly nurtured because he'd seen something the spreadsheets hadn't caught yet either. She asked for 2 weeks. The consultants protested, citing the cost of delay, but Margaret was the CEO, and for the first time in months, she felt like one. She assigned Thomas to lead a small team auditing the medical parts division exclusively, cutting through the noise of the other 2 dying divisions. He worked 18-hour days, coming in before sunrise so he could pick up Ivy from school by 4, then returning to the office after putting her to bed, working from his laptop at the kitchen table until his eyes burned. Ivy, precocious and endlessly curious, started asking him if he was saving the company with the little machines, a phrase she'd picked up from overhearing one of his late-night phone calls, and he'd smile and tell her, "Yes, sweetheart, that's exactly what we're doing." The 2 weeks stretched into 6 as the restructuring plan took shape. Thomas identified which contracts within the failing divisions could be sold off cleanly, which equipment could be liquidated to fund investment in the medical parts division, and which of the 300 employees had transferable skills that could be retrained for precision manufacturing instead of being let go. It wasn't painless. 40 jobs in the furniture division still had to be cut, and Margaret cried in her office the night she had to make those calls personally, remembering each name from company picnics her father used to host. But it wasn't the 300 the consultants had predicted. It wasn't the end. By the 4th month, the medical parts division, now operating independently under a new name Margaret chose in honor of her father, Whitfield Precision, had secured 2 new hospital supply contracts. By the 6th month, revenue had stabilized. By the 9th month, they'd hired back 12 of the employees who'd been let go, this time trained on the new equipment the restructuring had funded. Margaret promoted Thomas to Chief Financial Officer, a title he initially resisted, insisting he was just a numbers guy who'd gotten lucky. Margaret told him luck didn't stay up until 2 in the morning for 3 weeks straight while raising a 7-year-old alone. Luck didn't care enough to look past what everyone else assumed was hopeless. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that one person who truly cares can outweigh a room full of people who've stopped believing, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment about the part that moved you most, and share it with someone who might need this today. There's one more thing I want to ask you, and it means more than you know. When you comment, just type the word, hope. That single word helps this story reach the people who need to hear it, and it lets me know you're still here, still believing right alongside these characters. A year after that boardroom meeting, Margaret stood at the ribbon cutting for the newly renovated Whitfield Precision facility, the machines humming behind her, employees who'd once feared losing everything now wearing name badges with pride. Ivy stood in the front row holding her father's hand, wearing a tiny hard hat someone on the floor had given her as a joke that became a treasured gift. Margaret found Thomas in the crowd afterward and told him what she'd wanted to say for months, that her father used to tell her the numbers never lie, but sometimes they whisper instead of shout, and you need someone patient enough, someone who's already learned how to listen in the quiet hours of exhausted nights, to hear them. Thomas just smiled, squeezed his daughter's hand, and said the machines were humming just fine, and honestly, that was music enough for both of them.